Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, your guest host today for this May 1st, 2018 edition of Point of View. Kirby is away on a vacation, a much-deserved vacation, and this is May Day, or according to my millennials, it's going to be May Day in light of NSYNC's hit, It's Gonna Be Me. But so we are so excited that you've decided to join us, but we've got a big show for you today. We've got everything from the tariff situation that continues to evolve here in the U.S. and has ripple effects across the world, as well as we'll be talking a little bit about North Korea during this first hour, as well as the affinity, and is Kanye West becoming a conservative? He's tending to ripple out some things, ripple out some tweets, as well as just some of the implications of what he's been saying. So we'll be talking a little bit about Kanye West and his recent overtures towards conservatism kind of in the second half hour, and then kind of talk about a new study coming out with loneliness. One of the fascinating things, according to Cigna Health Insurance Company, put out a study, and it's just very fascinating, some of the trends that we're beginning to see relative to loneliness here in the American experiment. And we'll be talking a little bit about that as well, but we'll also be taking some of your phone calls. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. And we'll also, during the second hour, we'll have a couple of other guests that will be talking with us today, but we've got a special in-studio guest that will be coming in during the 2 o'clock hour. Jack Deere, Even in Our Darkness, is his latest book out. It is just a raw, very real book. Read it this morning, and I have so many questions for him, and you're going to want to stick around if you're a type of individual that is trying to take this faith, take your faith seriously. And it just kind of reminded me of Habakkuk more than anything. There was just this unadulterated, very raw, emotional feeling, but this pursuit after God, even in the midst of the hurt. You're going to want to stick around and hear from him during our interview, which is in the second hour as well. But let's go ahead and jump into the news relative to North Korea, relative to the tariff situation. Yesterday, President Donald Trump's administration has extended the negotiations on steel and aluminum tariffs for 30 days with Canada, the EU, and Mexico. If you'll remember, a little over a month ago, President Trump announced that he was going to enact certain tariffs upon territories in order to be able, some would say, to level the playing field. Well, he's decided that this was the original date that they were going to make that decision, but now he's decided to extend that date. It's also this kind of what was announced yesterday has also reached a deal in principle with Argentina, Brazil, and Australia in order to give them some type of exemptions as well, which the details are still lacking on that. But we do know that there's an extent that we want to kind of give them a little bit of special privilege just based upon some of our history as well as our friendship with them. If you'll remember, back in March, Mr. Trump imposed worldwide tariffs of 25% on U.S. imports of steel and 10% on aluminum. Some countries were exempted temporarily from those tariffs, including Canada, the EU, and Mexico. The EU is not reacting as well as one might expect with this news. The EU said delaying the decision prolongs market uncertainty, which was already having an effect on businesses, according to some of their numbers that they have been looking at. It was open to discussions, they said, but warned as a longstanding partner and friend of the U.S., quote, "We will not negotiate under threat." And so how is Washington reacting to some of this? Well, Washington has typically, especially from the conservative right side, has been a little bit hesitant towards tariffs. It goes all the way back to Ricardo Brando I believe, in his principle of incomparable advantage that says that really free trade allows there to be greater efficiency in the marketplace and a variety of services, as well as produces innovation. And typically that's what Republicans and on the right have held. And so it kind of echoes some of the responses that you're seeing out of the right. Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, "I'm not a fan of tariffs. This is a slippery slope that can't be good for our country." Senator Ben Sasse said of President Trump is threatening to light the American agriculture on fire. However, there were some that were at least intrigued by the idea and not completely closed off. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said the tariffs are not unreasonable, but explained how China still considers itself a developing nation that should not be subjected to the same trade rules as the U.S. and other developed countries. Stephen Myers, writing on the New York Times, notes how China might have the upper hand because they have greater control over their economy, with state-run companies dominating major sectors. This is kind of similar to what Ian Bremmer of the Eurasia Group, which is a geopolitical organization, has held, that China has a vested interest in innovation, specifically in the technological sector. And because of that, what we're continuing to see is they're investing heavily. The government is investing heavily into the private markets and really doesn't give us a great picture of what's actually succeeding over there. Well, what we're continuing to see is that we're expected to have about 100 tariffs on range of Chinese imports, from toys to electronic goods, that are coming out of China. Many viewed this move by the administration as punishment against China for the alleged theft of intellectual property. Concerning the numbers of that, IP theft costs the U.S. anywhere between $300 billion to $600 billion a year. According to an analysis from the Wharton budget model, a full-blown trade war would, over time, wipe out any gains of economic growth from the tax cuts that were recently passed as well as touted during this 2018 election by Republicans. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted on the news of tariffs by more than 700 points, if you'll remember, and the overseas markets did not respond well at all. This naturally raises the question as to whether a trade war is worth it. The Wall Street Journal editorial board, when the tariffs were announced, said that if bad Chinese practices are his being Donald Trump's main threat, then he'll need allies in Europe and Asia to present a unified front. It demands patient, sophisticated American leadership to rally other nations to join this effort. We continue to hear just about some of the effects that this could particularly cause as well. Some argue that tariffs create a more equitable playing field, allowing U.S. companies to compete fairly against government-subsidized companies, like I mentioned previously, relative to China, and against entities existing in countries that manipulate their currency. Again, what China has been alleged to do. However, there's both those on the right and, like I've mentioned, and those on the left as well that disagree relative to tariffs. According to a policy brief by economists with the trade partnership, the new tariffs can be expected to increase employment by 33,464 jobs. However, tariffs will also erase, according to their estimates, 179,000 other jobs, for a net of almost a negative 146,000 Americans being put out of work. For every job gained, more than 5 jobs are lost, and in doing so, they estimate that it would prevent 3% economic growth. So from a biblical perspective, are tariffs an unnecessary and burdensome tax that creates short-term wins to the detriment of long-term innovation, kind of similar to Nehemiah 5? Or are tariffs equitable measures that generate a fair marketplace, as we would see hinted at in Ruth 4 as well as Acts 15? Some may identify as nationalists, others may be globalists, but in our globalized world, our first identity is children of the King. According to Romans 8:14, as sons and daughters of the King, we recognize the value of unity and working together, from John 17:23 as well as Colossians 3:13 and 14. There's an African proverb that writes that if you want to go quickly, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So what does that look like going together? How is a Christian to think about the tariff situation that's moving forward? Well, we're going to have to take a commercial break, but when we come back from break, we'll analyze that from a Christian perspective. And so be sure to call in, 800-351-1212. We'll be taking your questions right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A new report by the Centers for Disease Control finds that teenage virgins are healthier than other students who are sexually active. At first, you might think that this is merely an obvious conclusion since virgins are not likely to contract a sexually transmitted disease. But the conclusions are based on many other factors as well. Students who are virgins actually rate significantly and consistently better in nearly all health-related behaviors and measures than their sexually active peers. Let's look at a few examples. Sexually active teens are 3,000% more likely to smoke daily than their virginal peers. And same-sex and bisexually sexually active teens are 9,000% more likely than virginal teens. The same dichotomy exists with dating violence. Sexually active teens are 260% more likely to experience some form of physical violence in dating relationships. Same-sex and bisexual sexually active teens are 600% more likely than their virginal peers. And as you might expect, there's a real difference in terms of alcohol and drug use. Sexually active teens are 337% more likely to binge drink than teen virgins. They're also 336% more likely to use marijuana and 500% more likely to have injected a drug than teen virgins. All of these statistics reinforce the idea that sexual chastity and involved parenting make a difference in the lives of teenagers. Some of the activities may not directly relate to being a virgin or being sexually active, but they do show a strong correlation between two different mindsets. Teens that control their sexual urges are usually making wise decisions about other aspects of their lives. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, your guest host today for the Point of View radio show on this May 1st, May Day, 2018 day. We have been talking about the tariff situation that's escalating, or I guess you could say being extended in Washington. We've also been taking some of your phone calls, so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And for those that are unfortunately having to look at me on Facebook, I want you to know that you can also leave a comment or question underneath that live video box. You just go right underneath there, and when you go right underneath there, you have the ability to be able to comment or question, and what you put online we'll mention over air as well, as long as it's appropriate. Obviously, we're not going to say anything on there, even though I probably would, but nevertheless, that's a whole different character issue that we can talk about at a later time. But continuing forward with the conversation relative to tariffs, what's interesting is the Trump administration said on Monday that it would delay a decision to impose steel and aluminum tariffs on the European Union, Canada, and Mexico for another 30 days, giving key allies a reprieve, according to the New York Times, as the White House tries to extract concessions from trading partners who have resisted those demands. We're continuing to see played out what a large part of the character that President Trump campaigned on in 2016 of being an individual that makes deals, that gets deals done, being the businessman. This extension reflects concerns by the Trump administration of a swift retaliation on American products by European unions, but will also give the Trump administration more breathing room, according to the New York Times, to work on a separate trade battle with China. Well, we've seen how some on the right as well as some on the left have responded to this. During the first segment, we talked about how Mitch McConnell said that he wasn't a fan of tariffs when this was originally announced. He called it a slippery slope that can't, according to him, can't be good for this country. Senator Ben Sasse, the junior senator out of Nebraska, said that President Trump is, quote, threatening to light American agriculture on fire. However, there are those in the business community that do see some validity to this move. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said the tariffs are not unreasonable, but explained how China still considers itself as a developing nation that shouldn't be subject to the same trade rules as the U.S. and other developed countries. Stephen Myers, writing at the New York Times, indicated that it's going to take a collective effort among the various countries in order that they might be able to have a greater control over their economy as well as state-run economies that are dominating major sectors of the market and the industry. Just to give you a brief rundown of some of the numbers that we have relative to what the tariffs could do, it's reported that there are around 100 tariffs on a range of 100 Chinese exports that have been positioned against China, ranging everything from toys to electronic goods. This is largely a result of kind of what's being considered intellectual theft of property, rather. The IP theft costs the U.S. between $300 and $600 billion a year. According to an analysis by the Wharton budget model, a full-blown trade war over time would wipe out any gains of economic growth from tax cuts, which are being so boasted about during this 2018 campaign season relative to the Republican side. However, this naturally raises a question whether it's worth it, right? According to a policy brief by economists with the trade partnership, the new tariffs can be expected to increase employment by 33,464 jobs. Unfortunately, it will also erase 179,000 other jobs with the net loss of 146,000 Americans being put out of work. For every job gained, that's more than 5 jobs that are lost, and in turn would also prevent their estimating 3% economic growth. So our tariffs, to quote Taylor Swift, are they Band-Aids on a bullet hole? Are tariffs an unnecessary burdensome tax that creates short-term wins to the detriment of long-term innovation? Or are tariffs equitable measures that generate a fair marketplace? Well, what we're continuing to see, there's an individual named Wayne Grudem that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. He wrote the phenomenal book Systematic Theology, but one of his following books was called Politics According to the Bible. Wayne Grudem argues that a government that seeks to be God's servant for your good should seek to reduce tariffs to eliminate them altogether because they lower prices, produce more freedom, and spread more good to the people. He's arguing from that language of being God's servant for your good is taken, that's language from Romans 13:4, that the government's been put into place in order that it might be able to restrain evil and then allow freedom to be able to live and move in order that individuals might be able to utilize their God-given gifts, rights, proclivities in order that they might be able to till the soil that God has placed them in. It's a very theologically dense argument that Grudem masterfully puts into a very short little sentence. He's operating out of the understanding that he's recognizing the truth from Acts 17, that God has placed us in certain boundaries at certain times and at certain places in this world, and he's put other individuals that are around us. It's recognizing the sovereignty as well as the providence of God. Coupled with that, we get the language from Genesis 1 and 2 about how God has given us a certain plot of land in order that we might cultivate it, according to Genesis 1:26 as well as Genesis 2. It's this idea of working the land. And since we are God's workmanship, according to Ephesians 2, it's using those proclivities as well as those skills that he's equipped us with, according to Hebrews 13:21, to use those skills in order to bring about value out of the land that he's put us in. And so the government, what it's doing isn't necessarily pushing us along, but the government is making sure that evil and equity and fairness rule in the land, or at least is prevalent in the land, in order that we might be able to work, one, for the glory of God on this May Day, right? We work for the glory of God according to 1 Corinthians 10:31 as well as Colossians 3:23. We work for the glory of God as well as the good of this world. We're seeking the welfare of our city according to Jeremiah 29:7. And so the government is this entity that's causing to restrain evil, to utilize the sword in order to punish evil and bring about justice but also allows good individuals to work the plot of land that they've been given in order to bring about value, and the value being the tide that causes all boats to rise in our little communities and societies that we've been placed in by the Lord God Almighty. However, the other side might argue, I would say, that tariffs seek to right wrongs perpetuated through copyright infringement and currency manipulation. There's a valid argument to be made that what China is doing relative to the alleged currency manipulation as well as the copyright infringement is in and of itself violating one of the core commandments of thou shalt not steal. How are we to operate fairly when China has been operating unfairly for years? Not only are they manipulating their currency, which is causing disbalance in the marketplace, and not able to see the true value of the product or service that they're offering or that we're buying, but they're also stealing our ideas. What some might argue. I think Apple might argue pretty loudly, I guess, for some of them. And so there's the other side of the argument as well from the biblical narrative that would point to the fact that tariffs might be a way to bring about justice. That's why, Isaiah 1:17, that we are to seek after justice, to be just according to Micah 6:8. This idea that God desires justice. On his throne in heaven, it says in Psalm 98, is made of justice and righteousness. As those individuals that have been compelled and called in order to make his kingdom come and his will be done, part of his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven is that in heaven there is perfect justice. Therefore, we should be active agents in order to allow justice to roll down like a mighty stream, as what Martin Luther King often channeled, pointing back to what Amos said in Amos 5:23. So what are we to think of? Which side wins? Do we enact tariffs or do we not enact tariffs? Well, I would say the Bible is not necessarily a good policy book, but it is an inspired book that helps Christians make his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And in heaven, justice reigns, people flourish, and mercy triumphs. To understand that we need to continue to argue and go back and forth, argue not in the negative sense, but kind of combat with each other with our ideas. Not necessarily attacking individuals, but being able to poke at ideas, because it's when we're arguing like this and when we're going back and forth that we really are taking part in kind of what Maimonides, this old century philosopher, would say is the active intellect of God. There are 4 times in the Hebrew Old Testament Hebraic scriptures that it's kind of precipiced the idea of furtherance of the faith and passing on the faith is kind of assumed that the children are going to ask these questions. It gives us the opportunity to channel our God to a large degree and to ask questions and to combat with one another these ideas. And so with that being said, we're going to continue to open up the phone lines. You can call in with your questions or your comments at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can log on to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, it's at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And for those of you that are watching on Facebook, you can type in a question or a comment, and we'll be able to we'll share what you put online over the air. But when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening relative to the tariff situation, but there's also other news in the air, right? That the artist of Jesus Walks, Kanye West, is now swayed towards conservative beliefs, as well as what's happening in North Korea. We'll be talking about all that and more right after this.
Does point of view make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as district health director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with point of view? Jeremy Dyes of First Liberty represented Dr. Walsh, and in February, the state of Georgia paid a large settlement for their religious discrimination. And Jeremy Dyes became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty, greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View Radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net/team. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit, and please do it today. Or call 800-347-5151. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. The Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. Today, Kirby Anderson is on vacation, and so I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. During the first half hour, we were talking about the tariff situation and the kind of the implementation or kind of the delay of implementation that's happening that was just made news yesterday, but that's not, in a shocking twist, the only thing that made news yesterday as well. What we continue to hear is that they're ongoing in the news is almost built in this understanding of what's happening relative to the North Korean situation. And yesterday, what came out is Kim Jong-un, who is the leader of North Korea, has said that he has struck somewhat of an agreement with South Korea that they are willing to host in the denuclearized militarized zone, the DMZ, located right there on the border of North and South Korea, would be a pristine and a good meeting place for Donald Trump, President Trump rather, and Kim Jong-un, as well as the South Korean leader, to meet during their kind of significant meeting that's coming up. Well, what we continue to know is that there is just more that's going on than what meets the eye. That even just 2 days ago, we were alerted that now Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also met with the leader of North Korea in Pyongyang during the Easter weekend. And we also learned even just yesterday that Leader Kim has said, Kim Jong-un rather, he's prepared to cede nuclear weapons if the U.S. pledges not to invade. On Sunday, Kim Jong-un told President Moon Jae-in of South Korea that he would abandon his nuclear weapons if the United States agreed to formally end the Korean War and promise not to invade his country. To catch you up on some of the lingo, what's happening there is the Korean War, or the Korean conflict, never ended. It continued forward, and they came to a peace, some type of a truce that ended, to a certain degree, ended the conflict, but didn't formally end the war that was happening. So there's just been this brimming of potential conflict that could come. In Washington, Trump officials spoke cautiously about the chances of reaching a deal, but laid out a plan for dismantling of the North's nuclear program, perhaps over a 2-year period. Some of the language that the Trump administration has used that they desire relative to North Korea is rapid denuclearization. They want it done quickly and swiftly. But one of the fascinating things is, who would have thought that we would have been in this position? And back in 2014, President Trump, or then just kind of business leader, apprentice host, Mr. Trump, had said that North Korea, in a tweet, is the last place he would want to go. But it appears as though he could potentially be going onto the peninsula at the very least. And now, what some are speculating out of a kind of an odds-making shop out of Britain, one of the Britain's leading odds-making shops, reporting to out of Bloomberg, is that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are the favorites, 2-to-1 odds, to win the Nobel Peace Prize this year. That even over the weekend, that crowds were chanting Nobel, Nobel at the campaign rally. Instead of going to the White House press correspondents' dinner, President Trump held a campaign rally, and it was at that rally on Saturday that they were chanting Nobel. Well, over the weekend, what we've also found out is that a declaration was adopted on the Korean Peninsula between the northern and southern factions, continuing to do the necessary work in order to get us to a place where there's actually achievable peace if, and or rather when, President Trump meets with the North Korean leader. This document was a pretty significant step towards peace. The document includes a pledge to work toward signing a peace deal by the end of the year, denuclearizing the peninsula in a phased manner, and also developing relations leading toward reunification. If you go all the way back to 1950, or probably you could stretch it all the way back to around mid 1940s, there was a divide that happened between the northern and southern parts of the peninsula, with the North going to the USSR, or the USSR having control over the North, and the South being controlled by the U.S. And then when the USSR started moving more of a presence onto the northern part, the U.S. moved more of a presence onto the southern part, and that's what happened in 1950. What we started to see was the escalation that inevitably led to the Korean conflict in 1950, all the way ending in 1952. So they're wanting to develop relations that would be leading toward potentially reunification, which it hasn't seen since the 1940s. None of these points serve as major concessions, but they are seen as increasing confidence and trust on the peninsula, as well as for the various interested parties. However, like I said, the phased manner, quote, of denuclearization strikes against the desires of the U.S., like I said, which want a rapid denuclearization. This raises a question that looms amid all the good news coming off the Korean Peninsula is what will be required of the U.S. Is it simply a pledge not to invade? Is there going to be, are they going to want the ease of economic sanctions to give North Korea international credibility? What we've known is that North Korea has never necessarily been afraid to go to the table and go back and forth and argue and come to an agreement. They did so in 1990, 1994, 2002. There's been a variety of times that they've gone to the table and agreed. The problem is that they've never held true to their word. They've always backed out in some form or fashion. So what does North Korea want? Well, according to Stratfor, which is a geopolitical agency, North Korean leadership wants recognition as a peer country and a reshaping of Kim's personal image. To quote Stratfor, presenting him as a cooperative, capable leader who can stand toe-to-toe with his counterparts on the international stage. One of the fascinating things is in the biblical narrative, we read how it rains on the just and unjust, meaning that God's goodness is not limited to godly people, from Matthew 5:45. Peace is a good gift and a glaring glimmer of eternity which comes when the divine breaks into the temporal. I think this serves as yet another example for us. Let's pray for April showers of his goodness that bring May flowers of peace, which yields an abundant harvest that will inevitably be for the good of the world. But what we continue to see is that there's much work to be done. Peace never comes idly. Peace is never just a byproduct of the status quo. As individuals that have heeded the idea of blessed are the peacemakers from Matthew 5 and Jesus' Beatitudes, we recognize the truth that peace requires work, and work requires us to be an active agent, not just a passive participant, rather. When some good things that have come is that we've started to build back up our depleted ranks relative to our diplomatic corps, with the confirmation of former representative as well as CIA chief Mike Pompeo now taking the lead at the State Department, as well as filling in some of those underpost positions. But we also know that there's just a lot that has to be done. The U.S. still has no ambassador to South Korea, and one of the top diplomats to North Korea stepped down earlier earlier last month. We're at less than full strength, and what we continue to see is that North Korea is wanting to ramp up the talks. To go back to Stratfor, as they noted, the denuclearization of North Korea is not simply the removal of their arsenal, but also concerns the U.S. force structure on the peninsula, namely the U.S. nuclear umbrella over South Korea. Our nuclear protection of the South threatens the North. And this segues into three kind of ideas. What will we talk about during these talks, which is going to be specifically interesting for us, i.e., what is the U.S. willing to compromise on, and what do we expect to get? And this kind of moves into the last point. Diplomatic meetings with our president lend great credibility to other figures. If the president of the United States were to go all the way to the Korean Peninsula, what does that say relative to the power structure that's put into place, right? That we know that there's power in presence as well as power in place. There's a convening power, and typically the U.S. president, who is the leader of the free world, typically has people come to him and not necessarily we always go to people. So that's kind of interesting. If we look to history, we remember how Vice President Pence would not even notice Kim Jong-nam, who's Kim Jong-un's sister, at the Winter Olympics. We remember the blowback former President Barack Obama received when he considered meeting with Iran. North Korea strongly desires respect as well as longevity on the world stage. Hosting the leader of a free world catapults this regime in terms of legitimacy. But considering some of the Christian numbers, I think it's pretty important for us to understand here. All the while, upwards of 50,000 Christians may currently be imprisoned in penal camps in North Korea. North Korea ranks number 1 as the world's worst religious persecutor. But our God is in the business of turning destroyers of the church into apostles of the church, i.e. Paul. So even though there is much work to be done, we recognize the truth that our God is the one who says he starts the good work and he sees it to completion. We're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks again, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Kanye West as well as loneliness. And so you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. 1212. For my millennials out there, the telephone is that thing that you text on, so you can just stop texting and you can call in. Or if you want to text, you can jump on over to the Facebook app and go to facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when you go there, you can see me, unfortunately, and type in a question underneath there. But we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The group known as the Chaplains Alliance for Religious Liberty recently gathered to honor outgoing Congressman Randy Forbes. At least 2 active-duty chaplains prayed at the event attended by multiple members of Congress. Now, you need to understand that the Chaplains Alliance is a coalition of chaplain endorsers, meaning it is a group of those religious leaders who represent religious organizations that credential our military's chaplains. Well, evidently, the prayers of the active-duty chaplains at the event didn't sit well with one activist group who insisted that the Department of Defense investigate the matter thoroughly, review the content of the prayers offered by these chaplains, and then discipline the chaplains for participating in what it called a, quote, fundamentalist Christian supremacy event. Well, the Air Force did investigate and found that the prayers offered by the chaplains did not violate any military regulation. Chaplains have long been a part of our military. In addition to caring for our service members, part of their official duties include offering prayer at public events and, importantly, interacting with chaplain endorsers. Chaplains are protected by military regulation and the Constitution. A chaplain's religious liberty includes the freedom to pray according to the specific religious tradition of the endorsing religious organization. No one, not even our military, has the authority to unlawfully suppress the religious beliefs of an American citizen. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone. But that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View. I'm your guest host, Nick Pitts, filling in for Kirby Anderson, who's on a much-deserved vacation. And we have been talking about during this hour everything from tariffs to North Korea situation. And now we're just going to make the logical jump over to Kanye West. Jesus walks. He does more than that, Mr. West. What we continue to see is that over the weekend, as well as earlier this week, Kanye West we've seen kind of a more of a political kind of side of Mr. West. As though crazy as it seems, President Trump and the rapper Kanye West share a history of being, I guess, somewhat close to one another. I guess during the campaign, Mr. West visited the Trump Tower one time. But now Mr. West has indicated that he is giving public praise to the president. On Wednesday of last week, the Chicago-raised Mr. West and the Queens-born Mr. Trump joined forces again, this time on Twitter, with the president thanking Mr. West for his public praise, including an assertion that the two were brothers who shared dragon energy. I'm not quite sure what dragon energy is, but if I had to guess, it's probably something relative to 5-hour energy drink or something along those lines. Nevertheless, in a string of tweets that seem to both outrage his fans as well as cause questions among some of those onlookers. Mr. West tried to defend his admiration for the president from the mob of people who can't make me not love him. To quote one Kanye West tweet, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals. And we have the right to independent thought." President Trump retweeted Kanye West, a phenomenon that only 2018 would know, retweeted him and said, quote, "Thank you, Kanye. Very cool." Fascinating talk, what we're continuing to see, that this is Kanye West. This is the rapper who once said former President Bush, quote, "doesn't care about black people," according to a Hurricane Katrina kind of fundraising effort on television, as well as previously appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone imitating Jesus, now finds himself the object of praise among some and derision among others because of his vocal support. Joining him was also Chance the Rapper. Though he openly supported Hillary Clinton, he joined to a certain extent Kanye on Wednesday in causing viral waves of the political nature by saying that black people don't only vote for Democrats. This all comes as just last week, country singer Shania Twain came out in support of President Trump, saying she appreciated his honesty and would have voted for him. After receiving backlash, she recanted. This all points back to something greater, which is this: Neil Postman was right. But before we expound upon Neil Postman, I'd love to take your phone calls. And so, what do you think about the Kanye West kind of situation as it unfolds? You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can go ahead and you can leave a message or a comment on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Put your comment right below the video, and then we will share what you said online over air if it's appropriate, obviously. One of the things that I'm always intrigued by is just how this individual, Neil Postman, who wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death back in 1985, still rings true, still rings relevant, and still rings pertinent in our society today. He pointed out in his, again, 1985 book that when education and entertainment become inseparable, the latter consumes the former and public discourse loses. To quote Postman, Americans no longer talk to each other, they entertain each other. They don't argue with propositions, they argue with good looks, celebrities, and commercials. This was backed up by the book Blue Suede Shoes, in which the author kind of made a very persuasive argument, whose author is, he also is the Mars Hill podcast writer. He makes a very persuasive argument relative to the significance as well as the power of celebrity today. That we are living in a world in which the celebrity not only holds power over our entertainment, but also has the potential and the proclivity to be able to shape some of our thoughts outside of entertainment as well. We can look no further to any type of event that's happening, and we can see the power of celebrity to raise issues and raise awareness for causes, whether that's humanitarian issues or political issues for that matter. But one of the fascinating things that Postman, I think, correctly identifies is that we've never lived in a day in which there's not been entertainment, but what's seen as entertainment today is also seen as information as well, that in order to be informed, we must be entertained. It's fascinating because regardless of your political ideology, we should be grateful that we live in a country where we can all freely voice our opinions. I don't want to fall into the same trap and say that an individual can only speak about that which they work and have credentials for, because that would make for a very quiet American kind of communal square. What we have is we have a beautiful system whereby we can freely raise our opinions and voice our issues. However, since the internet has amplified everyone's voice, the key moving forward will center on what David Foster Wallace identified in his commencement speech at Kenyon College. It's not necessarily what to think about every situation. But rather what to think about pertinent situations. That you, just because you have an opportunity to be able to raise your voice on any number of issues doesn't necessarily mean you're adding value to what was once the silence. In the biblical narrative, what we would know to be true is that life is short, time is precious, and your attention is valuable. It's the understanding that we are but mist, according to James 4:14, that even in Psalms 90, verse 12, it says that we should number our days, and that we have been given certain gifts from everything from 1 Peter 4:10 to 1 Corinthians 12 through 14 that specifically identifies some of those gifts, as well as Romans 12. We've all been given certain gifts and proclivities, and we want to make sure that we steward those gifts well in the time that we've been given. Though we all might have various levels of influence and we might have various numbers of days, what we all know is we all have 24 hours in this day that we've been given. That the psalmist would say that we should rejoice in the day that the Lord has made. And a key part of rejoicing is utilizing those gifts that God has given and investing them not only in his kingdom for his glory, but also for the good of this world. Just because an issue has been raised doesn't necessarily mean it needs your voice on the issue. But what's fascinating is we're living and moving in a world increasingly where celebrities are having a greater voice on issues, though they might not have expertise or credentials or kind of some of the necessary competence to speak into those issues. That just simply doesn't matter. I think this points back to a recent Barna study that I just read that certain individuals, I believe the number was 32% of individuals don't trust anyone but rely on their gut instinct. That feels about right. You see what I did there? I relied on my gut instinct to feel, no, bad jokes. But nevertheless, we're going to be continuing to take some of your phone calls and questions. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. I'd love to hear what you think about the Kanye West situation. We'll be talking about that in the next hour as well. Or we'll also be taking some of your questions and comments that you leave on Facebook. Facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Go over to that live video that you unfortunately have to see right now, and then put a comment or question underneath that video box. And from there, we'll be able to answer one of the questions that you might have. For example, there is an individual that is talking about the book that we'll be talking to the author about. Mr. Jack Deere will be on in the second hour to talk about his book, Even in Our Darkness. We'll be talking back and forth. It was a phenomenal book and can't wait. And so you need to stick around, Miss Marshall, to hear more about our interview with that. But we've got to go to one of those breaks right now. And so when we come back from the break, we'll continue our conversation relative to the loneliness epidemic that seems to be sweeping across the nation. And not only the loneliness epidemic, while this might be a significant problem for the U.S., this is a glorious opportunity for the church. We'll be back right after this.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
Welcome to Point of View for this second hour. For the first hour, for most of you, I am Nick Pitts, your guest host today. Kirby Anderson is off on vacation, on a much-deserved vacation, and I'm so glad that you decided to tune in with us, and we have got a great show for you as well. We have been talking about everything in the first hour, from the tariffs that are happening in North Korea, or tariffs rather, that are happening relative to China and the EU, and then also talking about the recent developments in North Korea. Specifically, what should a Christian think about what's happening over there as those that are called to be peacemakers? What does it look like to make peace on the Korean Peninsula that's largely been without peace in the North for the past 50 to 60 years, or I guess rather 70 years. You could go all the way back. We've been talking about that, as well as we were recently talking about Kanye West, and we'll continue that conversation about what are we to make of Kanye West's move towards conservatism based upon some of his Twitter feed. But we'll also tell you about some of the things that are coming up. We've got some exciting guests that'll be coming on here in the next 15 minutes. We've got Dave Ferguson, who will be here talking about the National Day of Prayer. Dr. Dave Ferguson serves as the executive director for several U.S. and global initiatives focused on the Great Commission, living empowered by the Great Commandment to love. He'll be talking to us a little bit more about what the National Day of Prayer looks like. And then also in the second hour, from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time, we'll be talking with the author of Even in Our Darkness, Jack Deere. You will want to stick around and listen to that. It's just a phenomenal book. If you have not read that book, I cannot more highly recommend it. It's just a very powerful telling of finding God in the midst of tragedy, and finding that God doesn't wait for you to come out of that, but rather walks with you through it. We'll be talking with him about that book as well. But also, just so you know, you can call in and ask your questions or share your point of views at 800-351-1212. Or, because it's me, I'm the millennial guy, you can leave a message over Facebook. So go to facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and you can leave a little message or comment online that we'll share over air during the show, as long as it's appropriate, obviously. But let's jump into the news, shall we? President Trump and Kanye West, a move that many would never have expected, but yet here we are again. Last Wednesday, so around 6 days ago, the Chicago raised Mr. West and the Queens-born Mr. Trump joined forces again, this time on Twitter, with the president thanking Mr. West, for his public praise, including an assertion that the two were brothers who shared dragon energy, according to the tweet. In a string of tweets that seemed to outrage some of his fans, Mr. West tried to defend his admiration for the president from the mob, he says, of people who can't make me not love him. So let's just jump on over to the tweet, shall we? So Kanye West tweeted on April 25th, quote, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We're both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals. And we have the right to independent thought." President Trump, in something that would only be known in 2018 and reported, retweeted Kanye West and said, "Thank you, Kanye. Very cool." And so we are left thinking, what is going on here? Kanye West, the one that the rapper that was known for the song Jesus Walks, but also the rapper who once said former President Bush, quote, "doesn't care about black people," and who previously appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone imitating Jesus, now finds himself the object of praise among some and derision among others because of his vocal support. Joining him was also Chance the Rapper, who offered on the social media network Twitter that black people aren't all Democrats. Though he openly supported Hillary Clinton, this tweet sent viral waves that in turn caused him to kind of semi-recant on some of his comments and what could be construed as support towards the president. This all comes as just last week, country singer Shania Twain came out in support of President Trump, saying she appreciated his honesty and would have voted for him. After receiving some backlash, she went ahead and recanted. And so this raises the inevitable question that I would love to hear from you. What are we to make of what's happening right now relative to our attention on Kanye West? Should we continue to give him attention? Should we be cheering the fact that he's moving towards a more conservative inclination? Or should we just kind of raise our hands in the air and just ask more questions than kind of disenfranchise ourselves from him? I would be very anxious and very interested to hear what you have to say relative to the Kanye West situation. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or we're also on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. There's a live video feed, and then you can leave a message right underneath that live feed in the comment box. You share your comment, and we'll share over on air what you have to say about this Kanye West situation. One of the fascinating things we were talking about right before the break is this idea that Neil Postman was right. In his prophetic book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, in 1985, he pointed out that when education and entertainment become inseparable, the latter consumes the former and the public discourse loses. Americans no longer talk to each other, rather they entertain each other. They don't argue with propositions, they argue with good looks, celebrities, and commercials, he says. Regardless of political ideology, we should be grateful that we live in a country where we can all freely voice our opinions. However, since the internet has amplified everyone's voice, the key moving forward will center on what David Foster Wallace identified in his commencement speech at Kenyon College. Not what to think about every situation, but rather what to think about pertinent situations. We recognize the truth that life is very short. It's but a mist, is what James says in James 4:14. That what Paul says in Ephesians 5:15 and 16, that the days are evil and we should make much of the days that we've been given. Just because we have the capacity to think about every situation doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, or there's a need to think about every situation. That you've been given certain gifts and skills and proclivities as well as a number of days, is what the psalmist is going to say in Psalm 90:12. And so with the gifts that you've been given, because you're the workmanship of God from Ephesians 2:10, what are we to think about this situation? What are we to make of what's happening and all the attention that's being given to Kanye West and what appears to be support of conservatism? We're going to continue talking about that, but we're going to have to take a break right now. But I want you to know that we have opened up the phone lines, and there appears to be a couple of people that have an opinion on this as well. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Or you can leave a comment or a message on the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. You'll see the live video that's appearing on Facebook. And then right underneath that live video, you can leave your comment or your question as well. And we will share what you share online over the air. And I'll be anxious to hear from you all. I think this is a very interesting topic as we've just continued to give more emphasis upon what celebrities think. That we do live in the land of the free because of the brave, and it offers us the opportunity to freely voice our opinions. But doesn't necessarily mean, even if we don't have the competence to have an opinion about these particular subjects, I'd be anxious to hear what are we to make of celebrities as they continue to share their political proclivities with us, and what are we to make of just this whole situation in its entirety as well. Again, we're going to have to take one of those breaks, but again, you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number 800-351-1212, or facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when we get back after this, we're going to take some of your phone calls relative to the Kanye West situation, the Chance the Rapper situation, as well as Shania Twain. I don't feel like a woman, but I do feel like a man, and I look forward to answering your questions in a gracious manner. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A new report by the Centers for Disease Control finds that teenage virgins are healthier than other students who are sexually active. At first, you might think that this is merely an obvious conclusion since virgins are not likely to contract a sexually transmitted disease. But the conclusions are based on many other factors as well. Students who are virgins actually rate significantly and consistently better in nearly all health-related behaviors and measures than their sexually active peers. Let's look at a few examples. Sexually active teens are 3,000% more likely to smoke daily than their virginal peers. And same-sex and bisexually sexually active teens are 9,000% more likely than virginal teens. The same dichotomy exists with dating violence. Sexually active teens are 260% more likely to experience some form of physical violence in dating relationships. Same-sex and bisexual sexually active teens are 600% more likely than their virginal peers. And as you might expect, there's a real difference in terms of alcohol and drug use. Sexually active teens are 337% more likely to binge drink than teen virgins. They're also 336% more likely to use marijuana and 500% more likely to have injected a drug than teen virgins. All of these statistics reinforce the idea that sexual chastity and involved parenting make a difference in the lives of teenagers. Some of the activities may not directly relate to being a virgin or being sexually active, but they do show a strong correlation between two different mindsets. Teens that control their sexual urges are usually making wise decisions about other aspects of their lives. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, your guest host today. Kirby Anderson is on vacation, a much-deserved vacation, and I've been taking your phone calls relative to the Kanye West situation. It appears as though in the recent past that Mr. West has showed a proclivity and an inclination towards supporting conservatism as well as President Trump, and it's just caused quite a stir. And as it seems as though on the phone lines, it's also caused quite a stir among some of you all right now. And so we are going to take some phone calls as well. And so we'll jump on over to Georgia right now. We've got Deborah in Georgia right now. Deborah, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Deborah, what is your point of view?
I don't understand why all these stars and athletes or even individuals or government people hear what other people think about their own views. I mean, that's the freedom that we have to express what we believe, and we shouldn't feel like we're hostages to the world for our own beliefs. And that not only goes from Trump, that goes religion or anything else.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point. I mean, everyone just, we live in the land of the free because of the brave, and because of that, many individuals can voice their opinion and share their kind of proclivity or their inclination that they're thinking. But one of the fascinating things, and I don't know if you can resonate with this, Deborah, is it always seems as though we hold celebrities, specifically kind of in the entertainment industry, we hold their opinion in higher regard than even the experts, which I just find very fascinating.
Well, I don't.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for your phone call. That was great. And so we're going to continue staying in Georgia right now. We've got Pam on the line. Pam, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Hey, Pam, what's your point of view?
My point of view is, God using him kind of to open up the minds of people, and the ones that we would least expect to say anything is, I believe it's kind of food for thought to just broaden the horizon a little bit. You know, everybody tries to cram everything down our throats, and we're not going to listen. We close off. But then when you just hear one little thing like that, and yeah, he's a celebrity and all that, and because of his reputation a time or two, I ain't cared too much for him. But when I heard that, I just felt the Spirit say, I'm using him. You know, he's opening up the minds of others that would normally not even consider the conservative. And Trump's done a lot of great things for black, white, for all of us as Americans. And we got to quit looking at whether we're black, white, or polka dotted. We got to look at us as all of us are Americans. And most of all, the Christian Americans really need to come together even more so. If we was to do that, we would be a force to be reckoned with for sure. But I really believe that Mr. West coming out, I believe that God is just using him to just open up the minds of some of those that wouldn't be thinking like that would be so closed-minded. That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, Pam, thank you so much. And I would say to our listeners, if you are polka dotted, you need to go see a doctor because you are highly contagious and have chickenpox probably. And so don't listen to Pam at this instance. You need to go directly to a hospital. But
definitely.
Thank you so much, Pam. I appreciate your opinion. I think it's a very interesting thing that there is this sense that we're very quick to tune off individuals that largely disagree with us or might have differing opinions with us, but we also see there's an openness relative to Christians specifically, that there's an openness whenever someone shares our opinion. We often come and kind of rejoice with them and celebrate them and give them a larger platform to be able to share their particular positions. But when they're sharing kind of some of what we would consider the things of this world, there's almost a sense that we just kind of close them off and just throw our hands up in the air and just blame it away towards the ways of the world. So I'd be really interested to continue to hear some of your opinions as well. There's an individual on Facebook, Miss Smith, says Kanye West is causing ripples for a reason. No praise here. Seems to be a little skeptical, and I can very much resonate with that. There's a sense that is this just another move by Mr. Smith or by Mr. West to be able to generate publicity and advertisement? Because after all, he is dropping a new album here in the coming year, and could he just not be expanding his commercial base by reaching out to individuals and causing individuals to like him that in turn might be able to purchase some of the albums that he's put forward? That's a great position that you've argued for, Ms. Smith. And so we're going to continue taking some of your phone calls. We've got Larry in Indiana right now. Larry, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for taking my call. In reference to Conway West, my skepticism here is that you're right. Publicity is publicity, whether it's bad or good. Shania Twain, the flip-flop, they're entitled to their opinions because they're citizens of the United States, just like you and I, you and me. I'm sorry. But in one sense, my fear is that some agree with him, some don't agree with him, based on his celebrity status. We can see that with Shania Twain's flip-flop there, but you got a little bit of pushback. It hurts there. In her cases, she might have thought it might hurt her sales. But I look at all these people, plus actors, in one sense, but in another, we pay, they sing, we pay, they dance, we pay, they act. If I really want to listen to their opinion, I will listen to it as another citizen, and I will not use their celebrity status. And if I want to see them, I want to listen to them, I'll pay to do it. Otherwise, if they use their celebrity status to further their careers, then that, I think, is a selfish reason. And we know about greed and pride.
You bring up a really great construct, Larry. I think it's very interesting, and I kind of agree with you there to a large degree. It's a sense that I'm gauging that they've got my interest because they've earned my interest in their particular domain, right? So, for example, there's a radio station in Nashville that has earned my interest whenever I'm back in Nashville because I like their particular point of views relative to the Nashville Predators, who happen to be in Game 3 tonight against the enemies, the Winnipeg Jets. But nevertheless, I don't listen to them. I don't listen to this radio station when I want to listen to any other type of music. I only listen to them when I want to hear Predators commentary. And kind of the same would be said for individuals relative to Kanye West. They listen to him because of Jesus Walks, Through the Wire, and some of those other hits, but they don't necessarily need to listen to him because he hasn't necessarily earned their trust, or maybe earned the confidence, rather, because of political matters. Is that a correct characterization?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we've heard other people say things and then turn around and say something else as soon as they get some pushback. So, yeah, I think it's my skepticism relies on, like you said, whether or not it's commercial push for themselves, and if it is, we shall see in the future about that, whether or not situations change and they go back in the other direction. There's a whole new, we don't need to get into it here, but there's a whole new conversation when you're talking about Kanye West. And when they use their talents to get where they get, and then they push an agenda based on a following of their popularity, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah. You brought up a great point. Well, Larry, thank you so much.
Because if they flip and go the other direction, a certain percentage, probably a large percentage, will follow them in turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Larry, thank you so much for your phone call. We're going to jump on over to North Carolina right now. We've got Nancy. Nancy, you there?
I am.
Hey, Nancy, what's your point of view?
My point of view is that I think that we've become a nation of non-thinkers. I think that it's up to us. We're listening to all of these celebrities. We have no clue what research they have done. We have no clue even if they know what they're talking about. So it's up to us to research all of these things, research the candidates, research the issues, research what radio station we listen to, what books we read. But we've got to get back to thinking and doing these things for ourselves, because your previous caller was right. The only thing that we're doing when we commit to listening to Kanye West or whoever it is give their opinion, we're just making them more popular and elevating their status in the entertainment world. And I don't think that that's what we should be doing when we're involved in something as serious as our government, as our society, and even our own personal lives. We should be thinking for ourselves and doing our research for ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy. I appreciate your comment, as well as I appreciate your attention to point of view. Hopefully we have earned your trust and that we are competent individuals that are speaking from an informed perspective relative to the issues of the day and the biblical narrative. And we'll be back right after this.
Does point of view make any difference? I think Dr. Eric Walsh would say it does. Dr. Walsh was fired from his job as district health director for the state of Georgia, not because of anything he did or failed to do on the job, but because of sermons he preached in his local church. What does that have to do with point of view? Jeremy Dyes of First Liberty represented Dr. Walsh, and in February, the state of Georgia paid a large settlement for their religious discrimination. And Jeremy Dyes became an attorney specializing in defending religious liberty, greatly because of what he learned listening to Point of View Radio as a child. That is the kind of difference you make when you support the Truth Team, but we can't make that difference without your help. Become a partner today in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Join the Truth Team at pointofview.net/team. Choose your giving level, stretch a bit, and please do it today. Or call 800-347-5151. pointofview.net/team. Or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your guest host today, Nick Pitts. Kirby Anderson is on a much-deserved vacation. I am so grateful that you've decided to join us today. During the first half hour, we've been talking about Kanye West and his recent kind of overtures and moves towards conservatism, especially directed through his Twitter account, as well as just some of his praise and support against the mob, he would say, to use his words, with relative to our President Donald Trump, saying that they share, quote, a dragon energy. No word on what dragon energy is, but it sounds awesome, and I want some of it. But nevertheless, we're going to transition right now. We've got over the phone right now Dr. Dave Ferguson, who serves as the executive director for several U.S. and global initiatives focused on Great Commission living, empowered by Great Commandment love. In the faith community, the Great Commandment Network serves more than 20 denominations and parachurch ministries through pastoral care, training strategies, and resource development. Dr. Ferguson has served on various national and international initiatives and boards, including Awakening American Alliance Cabinet, Empowered 21 Global and U.S. Cabinets, Garden Tomb Council in Jerusalem and London, and the Marriage Commission U.S. Steering Committee, among many others. Dr. Ferguson and his wife, Teresa, are co-founders of the Center for Relational Leadership. Dr. Ferguson, are you there?
I am here, sir.
Hey, so great to hear from you. And so tell us a little bit. You're here. You're going to be talking to us a little bit about the National Day of Prayer that's coming up here in a few days. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the National Day of Prayer. Usually it's always recognized first Thursday of May. Signed into law by Ronald Reagan. It was actually practiced much earlier than that, but official national recognition, and there'll be thousands of prayer gatherings all over the nation involving more than 1 million people. Some have estimated 2 million.
Wow.
They'll be in various settings, courthouses, restaurants, convention centers, and they'll be doing one thing, and that's prayer. And this year's theme is a prayer for unity in the midst of a very divided nation. Along the lines of what you were just mentioning, we seem to be so divided politically, racially. There's a much need for prayer for unity. So that'll be the theme this week as those gatherings take place.
That's phenomenal. I couldn't agree more. There's just so much research that's out there right now, but we are just becoming so politicized right now. And not only politicized, there's just such a distrust that's coming from that. We were talking about earlier in the hour how there's just this loneliness that's beginning to plague kind of the American experiment, where we've seen a decrease in the number of individuals having what started off 25 years ago as 4 friends on average to now jumping just below 2 friends on average. And because of that kind of loneliness that's sweeping across the U.S., there's also this isolation, and the isolation is breeding this distrust. And so really, when you're talking about unity, I mean, this could not come at a better time.
Yeah, I think that's really right. One of the Bible passages that we'll focus some on in many of the Thursday gatherings is after Jesus had prayed all night in Mark chapter 3. It says he called those disciples that they would, first of all, just be with him, just kind of do life with him. And it seems like in many ways, because of what you just alluded to, we've lost the sense and importance of just doing life with people. Moving beyond our differences, whether they're politically or racially or economically, and just being with people, just doing life together. And if we could get to that and then begin to believe that God would answer our prayers, we might find that loneliness, as you're talking about, that isolation, would begin to diminish because of the experienced community of true fellowship that we would enjoy.
I couldn't agree more. And what not a better way than to come together with some of your brothers and sisters and your neighbors as well, and to join in prayer. Again, we're on the air with Dave Ferguson, who serves as the executive director for several U.S. and global initiatives focused on Great Commission living, empowered by Great Commandment love. He will be taking your questions, and we'll be taking some of those phone calls at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. And for those of you that are paying attention on this thing called Facebook, which around 2 billion of you are, if numbers are correct, you can leave a question or comment on air, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that question that you put online over the air. And so, Dave, help us better understand, where can we find out more information where our local gathering might be for prayer?
Yeah, if you'll just go to nationaldayofprayer.org, and you can enter a zip code, and you'll find out where those gatherings are, and be really encouraged to take advantage of that. So, nationaldayofprayer.org.
That's phenomenal. nationaldayofprayer.org. And so help us better understand. I'm really intrigued. It seemed as though this has been going on much longer, but you said it just got started, or it got started rather during the Reagan administration. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it actually was kind of a little bit more underground or spontaneous prior to that.
I love it.
But 1988, Ronald Reagan signed into law a national recognition of the first Thursday of May as the National Day of Prayer. And so it's been recognized since then every year. And there will be a major gathering in the Capitol on Thursday evening that'll be live streamed on the nationaldayofprayer.org website and on Daystar, Trinity Broadcasting, and others. But these take place all over the nation in all different size cities and towns and communities. I'm in Central Texas, and we'll actually have probably 3 or 4 gatherings just in Central Texas.
That's
that
great.
Involve our governor and others as we just get together and pray.
Yeah, and like we said, relative to kind of the topic or kind of the centrality, the theme of this National Day of Prayer is unity. And I can't help but think about what Jesus prayed in John 17, that the world would know us by our unity with one another, and how important it is for us just to kind of come together. And what not a great conduit for us to come together than to pray. Not only to pray for our leaders of our country, as 1 Timothy 2 commands us to do, but also to pray for our enemies, as our friends, as well as there just seems to be so much turmoil domestically and abroad that just is in dire need of prayer. And more than simply just serving as kind of like a transition between the music and the sermon at a church, or rather just as kind of an opportunity for transition, really a need to petition and ask God to bless this nation, right?
Very much so, and I think you've made an important point of being able to come together and do it in community with others.
Yeah.
I think to some degree in our Western culture, probably influenced by some of our self-reliance, we can almost tend to think that we can take care of our own prayer life, and we need to and ought to. But there's something powerful and many biblical examples, just beginning with Acts and the upper room gathering of believers, as they were there together in community praying. There's a power when we do it with others. And so that's the hope for these National Day of Prayer gatherings.
That's phenomenal. I can't think of a better reason or rationale to come together. I mean, there really is just this sense of, I'm shocked, Dave. There was a study that was put out by Forbes that said that 51% of individuals don't know their neighbors' names. And what not a better opportunity than to get to know your neighbor, than coming together to pray for your neighbor, but hopefully to serve as an opportunity and a next step, potentially to have your neighbor into your home and bring about some of that hospitality that hopefully will have ripple effects of kindness and goodness to reach across the land in order that we might be unified together.
Yeah, no doubt about it. In fact, in one of your earlier comments, you mentioned just the drop in the number of friends that are being experienced today. And recently there was an article in the London Times where in England they've actually now appointed a minister to loneliness in England. And it was almost tragic as I read that, thinking that loneliness was that bad. But secondly, the tragedy of thinking that removing loneliness is somehow the government's responsibility.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That needs to be our responsibility. Just like you said, whether it's next door with my neighbors or some colleague at work, we each could take some of those steps to really be with people, do life together with people.
Completely agree. What's a pressing problem in our world today is a glorious opportunity for the church to do what they originally charged to do, which is to love your neighbors yourself. and it's really hard to love your neighbor if you don't know your neighbor. So I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. So tell our listeners one more time, Dave, where they might be able to find your website in order that they could figure out where their gathering is going to be in their locale.
Yeah, nationaldayofprayer.org. nationaldayofprayer.org.
nationaldayofprayer.org. You'll check that out to go pray together. That'll happen again on Thursday, the first Thursday of every of the month of May every year, instituted during Ronald Reagan's presidency in 1988. Dr. Dave Ferguson, thank you so much for joining us. We are so grateful for the work that you're doing, as well as for the kind of the example that you have set as well. We're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks, but when we come back from the commercial break, we're going to continue to open up the phone lines and open up the opportunity to talk about, one, the loneliness that continues to be a part of this American experiment, but then two, kind of some of the galvanizing nature as well, as what's happening as we become increasingly politicized, or as Celino Zito has said, where party structures are at their weakest point, but partisanship is at its highest point. We're going to be talking about that and more when we come back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The group known as the Chaplains Alliance for Religious Liberty recently gathered to honor outgoing Congressman Randy Forbes. At least 2 active-duty chaplains prayed at the event attended by multiple members of Congress. Now, you need to understand that the Chaplains Alliance is a coalition of chaplain endorsers, meaning it is a group of those religious leaders who represent religious organizations that credential our military's chaplains. Well, evidently, the prayers of the active-duty chaplains at the event didn't sit well with one activist group who insisted that the Department of Defense investigate the matter thoroughly, review the content of the prayers offered by these chaplains, and then discipline the chaplains for participating in what it called a, quote, fundamentalist Christian supremacy event. While the Air Force did investigate and found that the prayers offered by the chaplains did not violate any military regulation, chaplains have long been a part of our military. In addition to caring for our service members, part of their official duties include offering prayer at public events and, importantly, interacting with chaplain endorsers. Chaplains are protected by military regulation and the Constitution. A chaplain's religious liberty includes the freedom to pray according to the specific religious tradition of their endorsing religious organization. No one, not even our military, has the authority to unlawfully suppress the religious beliefs of an American citizen. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone. But that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I'm so grateful for you that you're joining us today. I am Nick Pitts. I am taking the place of Kirby Anderson today, who's on a much-deserved vacation. And we just got off the phone with Dr. David Ferguson, who was talking to us a little bit about the National Day of Prayer that's happening this Thursday. And so you can go onto the Point of View website, pointofview.net, to find out more information about the locale that you might be able to go to join together with your neighbors and your community members to to find a place that you can gather together to pray. And specifically this year, he was telling us that the topic will be on unity. And I can't think of a better topic for such a time as this that we find ourselves located. We've been taking some of your phone calls, and so we've got one of those phone calls right now. Paula in Mississippi wants to share with us. So, Paula, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Paula, what is your point of view?
Well, I love you guys to begin with. I've been listening forever. I just was going to share how I do and my friends do our National Day of Prayer. Mm-hmm. We all work, and we're scattered all over. The first time I participated was in 1995 in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Well, I've since moved south, but I stayed in touch with different friends. So what we do is we pick a time that's good for everybody, like a lunch break or something, and we just kind of predetermine the time, and we all, at that time, stop what we're doing just for a minute, two, whatever, and just say a prayer. And this year I hear the theme is unity, so that's what we'll be praying Thursday. And we just say our, do our prayers wherever we're at, but we're all doing it at the same time, whether we're physically together or not. And then usually now that we got the phones and all, we just text in Jesus' name, amen, and go on with the rest of our day. And every year I've pulled in one or two more people that's never heard of the National Day of Prayer. And I don't know how many I got going now. I haven't counted, but I've got them pretty much all in the South. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 people now that participate with me. So we don't have to be together, but we can be together in spirit.
That is phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Paula, for that testimony about what you were doing on the National Day of Prayer, and what we all have the opportunity to do, which is kind of gather together and to pray to the Lord God Almighty. I think one of the things that really radically shifted my understanding of prayer is a verse in Proverbs 15:8. There are times where I think that God is just kind of forced to listen to me just because he's all knowing and he's everywhere. But one of the fascinating things is about what we read in Proverbs 15:8 is that it's his delight to hear our prayer. So we think about certain things that give us delight. For me in particular, there is smooth. Peanut butter brings me great delight. Peeps, the candy, bring me great delight. And whenever the presence of one of those two things is around, there's a smile that creeps across my face. And there's just a joy that kind of indwells in my spirit because I know that I'm going to be able to indulge myself in that particular product or that thing. And just think about this for a second, that it says in Psalm 121, verse 3, that God neither sleeps nor slumbers. And so it's almost as if as you're sleeping through the night, God is wide awake, and he is delighted to hear from you in the morning as well as afternoon or night, but rather for our purposes, for the morning, he just can't wait to hear from you. He's like a child at Christmas, and if it's anything like my house, it was at 6 a.m. that we were able to leave our bedrooms in order that we could go to our parents' room, and wake them up to go downstairs to open up the gifts. That God is like a child in that he is so excited to be able to hear from you when you wake up, that you are a delight to hear from. Not because he begrudgingly has to, but because he loves you and wants to hear from you. And so just think about that during prayer, during this National Day of Prayer, as you focus on unity on Thursday, or as well just throughout the day. Because after all, it says in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, we're supposed to pray without ceasing. So I guess we don't have to wait till Thursday to pray. But nevertheless, one of the things that I want to touch on before we move into the next commercial break is a fascinating study that was released by Cigna Healthcare Group that was put in USA Today. That'll be in the print version, I believe, tomorrow, that young people are the loneliest, according to a surprising study. Young people are far more likely than senior citizens to report being lonely and in poor health, according to a survey of 20,000 Americans that was released just today. The overall national loneliness score was alarmingly high at 44 on a 20 to 80 scale. But the prevalence of social isolation among those 18 to 22 raises even more concern, according to the write-up in the USA Today. Younger people, part of the Generation Z, had loneliness scores of about 48 on average, compared with nearly 39, according to those that are 72 and older. What's fascinating is what we're continuing to see is this loneliness epidemic is a problem here in the U.S., but a glorious opportunity here for the church as well. Today, over 40% of adults in America report feeling lonely. 57% of meals in the United States are eaten alone. A 2014 study by the National Science Foundation found that 1 in 4 Americans said they have no one with whom they can talk about their personal troubles or triumphs. That number doubles, you heard me right, doubles to more than half of Americans if immediate family is not counted. The average number of friends we've seen shrunk from 3.6 to around 1.7 in a 25-year span. Research indicates people who report feeling lonely are more likely to experience worse symptoms when they're sick. Hear this. Loneliness has the same effect as smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of health, in terms of your health. Lonely workers perform more poorly, quit more often, and feel less satisfied with their jobs. This is a looming plague upon the U.S., but also a glorious opportunity for the church. Where's the room for the church? We were commissioned to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves. Well, it's really hard to love your neighbor when you don't know your neighbor's name. But one of the beautiful opportunities we have is that one of the ways that we can love our neighbor is to be hospitable, according to 1 Peter 4:9. It's this understanding that we can open up our home. G.K. Chesterton often has this phrase. He says that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves because it's often our neighbors that are our enemies that we're supposed to be praying for. Again, it's this opportunity for us to be able to see the loneliness that continues to spread across the U.S., but also the opportunity for the church to be the church. Because after all, there should be no lonely members in a church. They are the individuals that have heeded what it says in Hebrews 10:24 and 25, the idea, let us not forsake gathering together, but spur one another on towards love and good deeds. It's the understanding of being hospitable, because by being hospitable, you could be entertaining even angels when you open up your homes, but also your hearts to those that are surrounded by you. No one should be singing All by Myself with Celine Dion, but rather we should be all coming together right now over me, according to the Beatles. But nevertheless, we're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks, or I'm going to start singing myself. And so when we come back from commercial break, we're going to have the author Jack Deere in studio with us in his book, Even in Our Darkness. And I'm going to make this little plug where I'm going to continue to make plugs in the second hour, but this is a phenomenal book. You are going to need to go ahead and purchase this. So you can go to Amazon.com and search Even in Our Darkness, or hop on over to the Point of View website, pointofview.net, and find out more information on this book and where you can purchase it at your local bookstore or on Amazon. It is just a phenomenal read, very much about a picture of a God that doesn't meet us when we come out of trouble, but finds us in the midst of the trouble and walks with us through it. This is just a very raw, very real book that you are going to want to purchase and read through. And we'll be talking with him about some of these issues, and also opening up the phone lines so that you can talk to him as well. But being the millennial, you can jump on Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio and share your questions as well. So we're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks, but we'll be back right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View for this third hour. My name is Nick Pitts, and I am guest hosting for Kirby Anderson today. He's on a much-deserved vacation. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've been with us for 3 hours, we're going to need you to call in, because you deserve some type of trophy or reward. And so we are so grateful that you've joined us today. During the first hour, we were talking about everything from Kanye West to what's happening relative to the Chinese tariffs, as well as what's happening on the Korean Peninsula. In the second hour, we transitioned a little bit to talk about the National Day of Prayer that's coming up on this Thursday, as well as some of the loneliness epidemic that appears to be sweeping across the U.S. But here in the third hour, something I'm very excited about. We've got in studio with us Jack Deere, who is the author of the new book, Even in Our Darkness, A Story of Beauty and a Broken Life. And it's been described as the unsanitized version of the Christian life. Jack is a writer and lecturer who speaks throughout the world. Formerly, he was an assistant professor of Old Testament at Dallas Theological Seminary for 10 years until he was fired in 1987 for reversing his stance on the gifts of the Holy Spirit. He'd come to believe that such gifts as healing and prophecy are accessible today, which he touches on, and which is just a phenomenal little narrative in his book, Even in Our Darkness. Jack, so grateful that you're here with us today.
Glad to be here, Nick. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's so great, so great. So we've got the book Even in Our Darkness, and you can find out more information about how to purchase that. You can, of course, just go on Amazon, Even in Our Darkness, Jack Deere, who is the author, or you can go onto the website, pointofview.net, and find out more information. So tell us, Jack, a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the book, and then why you decided to write this. It's just a very raw, emotional, like seeing how God doesn't wait for you as you come through it, but really joins you in the midst of it and pursues after you, even in the hard times.
Well, I became a Christian at 17 years of age, and at 17, I didn't know a single verse of Scripture. At 27, I was a professor of Old Testament exegesis and Semitic languages at Dallas Theological Seminary. So I was thrust right into an academic world. And it probably took me 25 years to find out that what God really wanted from us was not a better performance, but a friendship in which he could enjoy us and we could enjoy him. And I wanted to write a book about it. I just couldn't figure out a way to do it.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And so one of the interesting things I picked up on is just the backstory of that. So kind of in the book, in the beginning, you talk about some of the childhood that you had and the role of your father in the midst of that childhood. Share with our listeners a little bit about that.
We did not go to church, but my dad told us there was a God and that he knew everything, that he was all powerful. But the bad thing he told me was that we got to heaven by being good. And my mom and my dad went to war at about when I was about 6 years old. I didn't understand their war. I just saw my mom's rages. And my dad would become more absentee from the family. Her rages would get worse. And she took her anger out on us. I mean, she called them spankings, but they were really beatings. One time, she was so angry with my brothers. I had 2 younger brothers and a baby sister. That she actually made us take our clothes off and beat us with rosebush switches until we actually bled. So that my family was violent. It was traumatic. We believed in God, but we had no Christian friends. We never went to church. And my dad committed suicide when I was 12 years old. I was the oldest of 4 kids. And he left a 34-year-old woman with a 10th grade education to care for 4 kids in 1961 in Texas. And there was no way even though my mom was a beautiful woman, there was no way she was going to make a living to take care of 4 kids. So we had this parade. We watched this parade of men come into our homes, all kinds of men, and they all had one thing in common: they didn't stay long. From the time I was 13 or 14, I could mix drinks at the bar and drink whiskey sours, and the men thought that was so cute. So Mom went wild, and my brothers and I just went south.
Yeah, I think that was one of the interesting things that you bring up, because I think you said your father was at Ford Motor Company, correct?
General Motors. General Motors. Yeah, Ford was our enemy.
Yeah. So I apologize, especially for my Tennessee friends. They will not like that I just equated General Motors and Ford. But nevertheless, you talk about how that significant moment when you lost your father, and even just you recounting just there, like the idea of your mother stripping you down naked and then and spanking you and disciplining you. I mean, this really does point back to this idea that this is a very unsanitized. It's a very raw. Why make this book so raw? Why make this book so vivid?
I actually wanted to tell the truth about our life, and I wanted to tell the truth about Christian life and how it's lived. It is not easy to live the Christian life. And from the time I started going to church, I would hear speakers stand on a stage and say the secret to the Christian life. And then they would propose some new formula. And somehow, if you just found that formula, if you could just practice it, you could pretty much get on cruise control. And I had some really famous writers tell me when I was just a young guy at Dallas that if I would just learn how to move in the power of the Holy Spirit, how to turn that power on, that life could be pretty much cruise control. And I kept trying those things, and they never worked out for me. But still, the message from the stage was, I'm living this life, and if you'll just follow me, you can live it too. And it's pretty much life on cruise control.
Yeah, one of the things I was mentioning to you, it seems though there's the rawness of the book really just reminds me of almost like Habakkuk, right?
Yeah.
Like you just have this prophet that just sees destruction that's about to come through the enemies of God, and he's just calling out to God to do something. And he's willing to admit that the Christian life is not easy. And this book very much reminds me of that, in that this is not it's a great book to read, but it's a hard book to read at times just because of how vivid some of the details are. But there's just such richness in the details, because we find that even though life may be hard, but God is still good, and that he's pursuing after you.
Yeah, he's good. He's totally brilliant and creative in the way that he expresses his love for us. But I wasn't looking so much for his expressions of love is I was trying to make my performance better, be a better prayer, be a better witness, study scripture more. And so my emphasis was on my performance instead of enjoying a person. There's a huge difference between those perspectives.
Yeah. And again, it reminds me of, there's a part in the book where he talks about pursuing after purity. Often, and that kind of goes back to that performance component. But we'll talk a little bit about that and more when we come back. But also want to let you know that you can call in as well as leave a comment or question on Facebook to ask Jack Deere that we're talking to. Jack Deere, who's the author of Even in Our Darkness. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can jump on over to the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. You'll see that live video box, and then right underneath that, you can leave a comment or question, and we'll get to that comment or question over the air when we get back after this. But again, we are talking with Jack Deere right now, Even in Our Darkness, and so you're going to want to pick up this book. I've got some more good questions, I think, to ask him, because it's such a rich book, because it's not this. It doesn't. It's kind of not fulfilling or not moving towards this idea that following after Jesus is easy and is just all happy and fun and games, but rather really does echo what Peter would say, that don't be surprised at the fiery ordeals that come among you, that all who desire to live a Christian life will endure persecution. There's just a difficulty it comes when following after Jesus that this book really does pick up on very well. And so we're going to have to take one of those commercial breaks, but when we come back from the commercial break, we'll talk to Jack a little bit more. So be sure to tune back in, as well as check out the website, pointofview.net, to find out more information on the book, as well as more information about where you might be able to purchase that. And we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A new report by the Centers for Disease Control finds that teenage virgins are healthier than other students who are sexually active. At first, you might think that this is merely an obvious conclusion since virgins are not likely to contract a sexually transmitted disease. But the conclusions are based on many other factors as well. Students who are virgins actually rate significantly and consistently better in nearly all health-related behaviors and measures than their sexually active peers. Let's look at a few examples. Sexually active teens are 3,000% more likely to smoke daily than their virginal peers. And same-sex and bisexually sexually active teens are 9,000% more likely than virginal teens. The same dichotomy exists with dating violence. Sexually active teens are 260% more likely to experience some form of physical violence in dating relationships. Same-sex and bisexual sexually active teens are 600% more likely than their virginal peers. And as you might expect, there's a real difference in terms of alcohol and drug use. Sexually active teens are 337% more likely to binge drink than teen virgins. They're also 336% more likely to use marijuana and 500% more likely to have injected a drug than teen virgins. All of these statistics reinforce the idea that sexual chastity and involved parenting make a difference in the lives of teenagers. Some of the activities may not directly relate to being a virgin or being sexually active, but they do show a strong correlation between two different mindsets. Teens that control their sexual urges are usually making wise decisions about other aspects of their lives. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts. I'm joined here in studio by Jack Deere, who's the author of Even in Our Darkness, and we've been just having a great conversation off air. But wanted to ask one of the questions, because this is such a rich book, but also just shows how God is walking through you with it in the darkness, but also just this midst of not performing in order to earn his love, but rather you've earned his love, and that compels that type of performance. So tell us a little bit about how it all started. How did you become a Christian?
Okay, I was 17 years old. I was in actually from the time I was about 14 or 15, I was in a group of 8 guys. Most of us were athletes. And we all came from broken homes or homes that were breaking, parents that were alcoholic or becoming alcoholic, so there was virtually no supervision over us. For instance, we always had an empty house to hang out in. So one night, 8 of us were at a house, and one of the guys, the owner at his house, was passing around nude pictures of his mom that his presumably father had taken. And we were all looking at him, commenting on her, completely nude pictures, and no one knew that was sick. It was just the life. It was just life for us. And we played reckless games with shotguns, that sort of thing, drove 120 miles an hour drunk. And there was one smart guy in that group. His name was Bruce. And Bruce chased a blonde to church camp the summer before our sophomore year. And when I say Bruce was smart, I mean, in his everyday speech, he used words like apogee, fistula.
Wow.
He's also neurotic. And maybe because he was neurotic, the girls felt safe with him. But he talked to all the beautiful girls in school on the phone, and they told him their secrets, and sometimes he would tell me their secrets. Well, he chased a blonde named Dixie to church camp the summer before our sophomore year, and he didn't catch Dixie, but he caught religion. Southern Baptist, hellfire, damnation religion.
Wow.
And he came back telling us we were supposed to respect girls, we weren't supposed to get drunk anymore, and we exiled him from our group, wouldn't have anything to do with him. And Bruce was obnoxious before he became a Christian, but when he became religious, I mean, he took obnoxiousness to a whole new level. He would come to school with a King James New Testament Bible in his front shirt pocket. You say, well, how did you know he had a Bible in his pocket? Because he let the little ribbon hang out over his shirt. Now he ate lunch by himself in the school cafeteria, but he would make a show of praying silently before he ate lunch. So we kicked him out of our group. 18 months later, every day for 18 months he prayed for me.
Wow.
He prayed for my salvation. He considered me his best friend, even though I wouldn't talk to him anymore. He got kids in the Baptist church where he went to pray for me. And on December 18th, 1965, I had just turned 17. I spent the night with him to meet some beautiful girls from another high school the next morning. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I said, Bruce, how do you get into heaven? My dad told me you got into heaven by being good, so I'd given up. And I said, how do you think you get into heaven, Bruce? And he said, Jackie, Jesus Christ died on the cross for you. Nick, that was the first time I ever heard Jesus Christ died for me. And you say, how do you grow up in the Bible Belt and not get that message? Well, you had to go to church. You had to have Christian friends. I didn't even know who Jesus Christ was until the spring of my 16th year. I saw the movie Greatest Story Ever Told. Up until that time, I thought Jesus Christ was a swear word.
Wow.
And I saw the movie, I saw the cross, and I thought, oh, what a nice guy. Why'd they have to do that? I never connected it. So he said, Jesus Christ died on the cross for you. If you will trust him to forgive you and give you a new life, he will come into your heart and never leave. And I said, that can't be true, Bruce. So when you're 17 years old and everyone you've ever loved has left you,
yeah,
to hear the greatest person in the universe will never leave you, it's just too good to be true. So I said, that can't be true. And Bruce said, oh, it's true. He was just so quiet and so assured. And I said, how do you know? And he said, because Jesus said so, and Jesus can't lie. And then he quoted John 10:28 to me. This was my first verse of Scripture. He said, Jesus said, I give my sheep eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. And when I heard that word, I was instantly born again. I couldn't have told you I was born again. I had no religious words. Salvation, confession, justification, none of that stuff was in my vocabulary. All I said in my heart was, God, I'm coming over to your side. And about 2 or 3 days later, I called Bruce, and I said, Bruce, I don't know what you guys call this, but I want to come over to your side now. He goes, don't go anyplace. I'll be right there. 10 minutes later, he was at my house, shoved the Bible under my nose, read the Sermon on the Mount, explained it to me, and said, now read this. I started reading when I was 17, and I never stopped. That was the beginning of my new life.
Wow. And I can imagine, like, just, again, the way that you frame it, for an individual like yourself that has grown up in a home that was dysfunctional, that one has lost his father at an early age, that I can't imagine the significance of having someone like Jesus, someone that was perfect, say that I want to be with you and I also want to walk with you through this. That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And so we've got Jack Deere, author of Even in Our Darkness, here with us, and we're taking your phone calls, 800-351-1212. We're going to take one of those phone calls right now. We've got Steve in Georgia right now. Steve, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Steve, what is your question?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Thursday afternoons, I go to our local county jail, and I talk to inmates for about an hour and a half, and sometimes we're just all over the map and with questions and dialogue and such. Every now and then, one will tell me a story of their background, of their growing up, and it's just heartbreaking. And I just don't feel like giving the pat answer. Pray more, trust the Holy Spirit, yada, 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 that kind of thing. And sometimes I just don't know what to say to these guys. So I would appreciate a comment here.
Well, I think the most powerful thing we have is not our theological arguments. It's our story of experiencing the wisdom, power, affection of God. And I think one of the most important things for someone who's lost his freedom is in that jail, in that deprived life that they're in right now, is to be able to feel the affection of God, that just like they are right now, without one more improvement, without praying more, without doing X more, they can actually feel the affection of the King of the universe and know that they are beloved. Then I have stories where I talk about different experiences. And in my early days, that was not a common experience. I didn't know to ask for it. I didn't know to expect it. But in these last days, it's become a normal thing for me. He breaks through in all sorts of ways to let me feel his affection, his love. And then that produces more love for God on our part.
That's great.
That is a great answer. That is a great answer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
sir.
Thanks so much for calling, Steve. Again, Jack, I think this is one of the interesting things that you brought about in the book, that you are a theologian. You're one, we're all theologians, but two, you're classically trained by not only going to DTS, but also studying at DTS, studying Bruce Waltke, from what I remember. So what is the difference between how you're explaining some of these doctrines of the faith and how theologians, I guess you would say proper theologians, kind of are doing that? Where's this difference coming from?
I think one of the biggest differences, at least for me, when I was at Dallas, is there's a tendency to live out of our mind and to figure things out, to explain things, and the emphasis is on our mind. And in fact, one of my professors, not Bruce Waltke, but one of my professors early in seminary, said to the whole class, it was a Greek class, he said, "Liberals feel, we think," and the whole class applauded. And I don't know if he meant to do this, but what he accomplished in that little slogan was, feelings are bad. Get out of your feelings. They're going to be deceived. Get into your minds and think. So when we talk about love, we talk about some rational form of love. Oh, I know God loves me because Scripture says so. Well, I was a young life leader for 11 years, and I can't tell you how many students I heard say, well, I know my Father loves me. And their eyes were downcast, and I'm thinking, if your Father loves you, why are you so sad when you say it? So they had this intellectual knowledge they wanted to believe, but they didn't have an experience, a feeling of that love. And I think that's one of the defects, or can be one of the defects of academic theology, is it doesn't teach you how to experience God on a daily level.
Yeah, I continue to think there's certain verses that are always go, you love the Lord your God with all your mind. You come and let us reason together in Isaiah 1. There's the sense that we're always prepared to give a response with truth and grace. But then there's also the side that we hear about David. One thing I've asked, and that I shall seek, to gaze in the house of your Lord all the days of my life. This experiential feeling that's so prevalent throughout the Psalms as well as throughout the biblical narrative, I think is one of the things that I'm so appreciative of that you find in the book. And I would just highly encourage our listeners to be able to go purchase that so that they might be able not only to love the Lord their God with all their mind, but also with all their heart as well. And so we're gonna have to take one of those breaks, but when we come back, we're gonna continue to talk to Jack Deere, and we'll be taking some of your phone calls as well. So call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212, or jump on over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and we'll be taking some of your questions and comments right after this.
Imagine you work where you know people do not share your faith, and they certainly don't agree with a Christian view of life and culture. You are surrounded by hostility every single day. How important would it be to have solid information to back you up? Jim in South Carolina listens to Point of View in the afternoons. He writes, I teach in a public secular university and enjoy actually being a voice for the biblical Christian worldview in a liberal setting. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for being bold and proclaiming truth. And Jim finishes, I pray for you daily. Jim works in hostile territory, and he prays for Point of View because Point of View is a source of truth. Please help us continue being here for Jim and everyone else. We need you to visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151 and join the Truth Team. Enable us to be here each day by giving each month. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts. Your guest host today, Kirby Anderson, is on a much-deserved vacation. I'm joined in studio by author Jack Deere, who is the author of the new book that's just come out this month, Even in Our Darkness, A Story of Beauty in a Broken Life. And we've been taking some of your phone calls as well as some of your questions through Facebook. So you can continue to call in, 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. Or jump on over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and you can share a question or comment over there, and we'll share it on air as well. And so Rich on Facebook has a pretty good question, Jack, that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Rich asked, do you think many give up on God because of suffering? Why, even in suffering, have you continued to walk with God?
I think that's a great question, and I actually get that question all the time. People say, how did you hang with God when you lost your son to suicide, or when your wife left you, or any number of things? And my answer to that is my bad days have never been my problem. It's my good days. That's where I have a tendency to forget God and leave him. But in the really bad days, I found my son in his room on December 27th, 2000, his lifeless body. He had shot himself with my handgun on a mountain in Montana. And where do you go when something like that happens? Your heart's broken. It's ripped in ways you thought you could never experience. There's no training for losing a child. There's no training for losing a child to suicide. So what are you going to do? Are you going to drink more? Are you going to try to work harder, earn more money? If there's any hope of healing, if there's any hope of returning to some semblance of a normal life, that hope has got to be in God. So our relationship is going to change. But I've got to connect with him in a deep way. And he's come through for us. Early on in those early weeks, he would break into our darkness in such creative ways, showing us that he was there. And that was important. He really is there. He understands all of this. He didn't take away the pain, but those inbreakings, those experiences of his love, actually gave us power to endure and give us a space to walk out this healing with him.
It's phenomenal. I think one of the things that we were talking about in the book in 225, you said eating was a betrayal of love. How can I enjoy food on the day my son had killed himself? This is just a kind of a glimmer of just one, the brilliance of the writing, but then two, just some of the rawness of the stories that you're sharing. And it goes back to, you're really pulling no punches here. You're really sharing a lot that you're not going to find almost in any other book, which is probably the reason why you wrote it, right?
Yeah, and people will say that. They read the book and they say, I felt like I was there with you in the room, or I was there standing in that crowd with you. And that's the way I want to write it. I want to write about what we are actually experiencing, both of the bad and also of God's goodness and redemption and mercy.
Yeah, I think that we were talking, there's like this differentiation that sometimes it seems as though we can go to church and we're not connecting with the pastor. Yeah. There's a certain limitation that's happening through what's being communicated and what's being experienced in the home and in the circles and spheres when they go back for the 6 other days of the week. But this book really does show that there's not nearly a great as divide as we might think that there is, that pastors, individuals that are before everybody, are going through many of the difficult heartaches that individuals in the pews are going through, right?
That, and also we have a tendency towards self-righteousness that other people don't have. And C.S. Lewis once said, a doctrine never seems so hollow to him as just after he finished defending it. And so we who stand on a stage and deal with the scripture, that sort of stuff, week in, week out, it is so easy to develop a calloused heart. And it's so easy to fall into that trap where when we think of God, we think of an obligation. And so what do we preach? We preach obligations. So people come into church on Sunday. They know they don't pray enough. They know they don't read the Bible enough. They don't witness enough. They're not kind enough to their spouse, et cetera, et cetera. So they come in feeling that way, and then we tell them, you should pray more, you should read the Bible, you should witness. And then they leave feeling worse than when they came. Because God did not create us to live under obligations. He created us to enjoy him. Adam came alive with when God breathed the breath of life into his nostrils. He came alive in a kiss. So it's not like obligations aren't important. They're just not the most important thing. Feeling the affection of God, having love for him, that's the most important thing in the world, and he takes the initiative to produce that love for us.
Yeah, we're talking with Jack Deere right now, who's the author of Even in Our Darkness. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. Or leave a question or comment over on Facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and we'll get to that. So that brings a question that I'm sure many of our listeners are asking right now, Jack. It's this sense of coming into church, recognizing that they've fallen short, very intimately acquainted with their sin and some of their shortcomings that they're coming through, and then feeling a weight of guilt because they're not measuring up. Just talking with you, it's just very obvious that you've been marked by love, that you've experienced and that you've encountered a loving relationship. So how does someone on the other side, our listeners, how do they open themselves up to a loving relationship with the Father?
Well, I'll tell you what happened to me. So I'm one of those guys who's preaching obligations. I'm 38 years old. I meet a 33-year-old preacher named Mike Bickle, and he uses the phrase passion for God. And I said, what? He said, Jack, passion for God. And I go, no, what are you talking about? I had never heard the phrase passion for God. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he goes, well, how do you love God? And I go, well, you obey God. And he said, well, yeah, that's true. But you can't turn that sentence around. You can't say, if I obey God, I love God. Because we obey people all the time we don't love. I mean, people do it in the Army. People do it in the workforce. He said, what you've done, Jack, if you make obedience the main ingredient of your love for God, what you've done is you've just taken all the feeling out of love. And you are so far away from the psalmist and who were passionate about God. And it made such sense to me. And then I listened to him give a message on it. And for the first time since I lost my young life leader, I wanted the spiritual life of someone else I saw. And so I asked him, I go, how do you get passion for God? And he goes, Jack, you get it like you get everything else. You pray for it. And then he turned to John 17:26. You alluded to that great prayer for unity, Jesus' prayer earlier in one of the programs. Well, the last verse is verse 26, where Jesus says, Father, I've shown the apostles what you're like, in order that they may love you like you love me. And so Mike just said, turn that into a prayer. Father, grant me a work of the Holy Spirit to love the Son of God like you love him. He said, it takes God to love God. And I'm sitting out there, and I'm thinking, yeah, of course it does. How come I never heard that phrase before? It takes God to love God. Why am I learning this from a 33-year-old guy? Because in his 20s, he set his heart to love God, but he knew that God would have to take the initiative. So how do you get God to take the initiative? You just ask him for something only he can do. So I made that the main prayer of my life, and then a few other prayers, which I mentioned in the book, just made them the main thing. I still want to obey God and do the things Scripture commands, but gradually over time, this affection that he had for me started creeping in. It started changing my taste.
Yeah, that we're compelled by the love of God, right?
Yeah.
2 Corinthians 5:14. Yeah. So you mentioned that there's various other points where you talk about those prayers that you're making a part of your life. And I just can't think, I mean, again, I can't highly recommend this book enough to our listeners. And so go on to pointofview.net and go purchase this book as quickly as you can. So you're writing this very unsanitized version of Christianity. Is there a story in the book that was just really difficult to put into the pages?
Yeah, there were a number of stories. In the fall of 2009, my wife Lisa left me, and she left a 12-page note, and it was the worst note I ever received. And what makes it worse is she's the kindest person I've ever known. And to write or to say some of the contents of that note, some of the defects that she found in me, some of the humiliations that I put her through, those were hard. But I didn't do everything in the note, but I did some of the things. And had I been the kind of husband I should have been, she wouldn't have left. But that was hard, writing that story.
Yeah, but even it's not only that happened, but God interacted and God moved in that. That's what I love about the book. There's always just this circular dance that's going on about what happened, but how God moved as well.
Yeah, because her note led me to make some confessions to God first off, and led me to change my heart. And so her leaving me, she was gone for a couple of months before she came back, turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of bringing me closer to God, changing some of the things in me that needed to be changed in relation to her.
That's phenomenal. And so we're going to have to take one more break before we have one more last segment with Jack Deere, author of Even in Our Darkness, A Story of Beauty in a Broken Life. But you can still call in. We'll have one more 9-minute segment that we'll have. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can hop on over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And if you see the live video, you unfortunately have to see me sometimes, but if you go right underneath it, there should be a comment box. You leave your question, what you put online, we'll share over air. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The group known as the Chaplains Alliance for Religious Liberty recently gathered to honor outgoing Congressman Randy Forbes. At least 2 active-duty chaplains prayed at the event attended by multiple members of Congress. Now, you need to understand that the Chaplains Alliance is a coalition of chaplain endorsers, meaning it is a group of those religious leaders who represent religious organizations that credential our military's chaplains. Well, evidently, the prayers of the active-duty chaplains at the event didn't sit well with one activist group who insisted that the Department of Defense investigate the matter thoroughly, review the content of the prayers offered by these chaplains, and then discipline the chaplains for participating in what it called a, quote, fundamentalist Christian supremacy event. Well, the Air Force did investigate and found that the prayers offered by the chaplains did not violate any military regulation. Chaplains have long been a part of our military. In addition to caring for our service members, part of their official duties include offering prayer at public events and, importantly, interacting with chaplain endorsers. Chaplains are protected by military regulation and the Constitution. A chaplain's religious liberty includes the freedom to pray according to the specific religious tradition of their endorsing religious organization. No one, not even our military, has the authority to unlawfully suppress the religious beliefs of an American citizen. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone. But that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for this May 1st, 2018 day. I am Nick Pitts, your guest host today, and we've got Jack Deere, who is in studio, that is the author of Even in Our Darkness, A Story of Beauty and a Broken Life. And for this last segment, you can call in with questions or comments that you might have, 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And Jack, one of the questions before we continue to open it up to phone calls is, I'm really interested. What have you learned about dealing with grief through all this difficulty that you've gone through, but the redemption that's come from it?
First off, I don't think there's one paradigm for dealing with grief that works for everybody. So, in fact, I said after we lost our son, I'm not going to read grief books right now. I'm just going to talk to God about this. And so the thing that one of the things that was most valuable to us is we have deep friendships. And our friends from over the years gathered around us. And when we couldn't wash clothes, they washed our clothes. And none of our closest friends tried to get God off the hook for the death of our son. All they did was they cried with us. They listened to us when we just wanted to talk about how we felt. And we said some really raw things, and they would just cry with us. So having people that love you and are around you, and especially in those early times, for us, that was so important. And there's a tendency for some people to isolate and maybe to rely on drugs or to rely on alcohol. And we didn't do that. I refused to drink anything because I was afraid I would never stop drinking if I drank wine again. So for a long time, I didn't drink anything. But number one, immediate practical suggestion is the love of our friends. Number two is I was still pursuing a friendship with God, still talking to him every day, asking him questions. And I found him, if you read the book, I tell about specific incidences where he intervened in our life. I'll just repeat one story in the book. So it's been 2 weeks after the funeral. My a bill from the funeral home arrives. It's $10,064.69. And 30 minutes later, my secretary comes in, and she has a huge sack of mail. I know exactly what it is. I dump it out on the desk. It's 38 sympathy cards. So I start opening up the sympathy cards, and 22 checks fall out. The checks, my son shot himself when he was 22 years old. So one check for each year of his life. The checks total $10,065. Wow. Just a few cents more than it took to put his body in the ground. So I sat there, and I didn't say thank you. I still had, at that time, plenty of money left over from the stock market. I could write a check for his funeral. So I didn't need it. So I sat there stunned, and then finally I said, "What are you saying, God? What are you saying?" And then I heard this: I paid for his death, I paid for his life, and I'll pay for everything you need the rest of your life. I mean, wow. My heart beats so fast. I felt so much love. I didn't feel the pain go away, but it's like he sat down in that room beside me and said, "Look, I'm here. Everything you need to go through this, I'm going to give it to you. I love you."
Wow, that is powerful. We'll continue taking some phone calls. We've got Mary Beth in Arizona right now. Mary Beth, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Mary Beth, what is your point of view?
Well, first of all, you might want to tell your listeners how to spell his last name. I didn't know if it was like deer, like sweetheart, or like deer, like a deer.
Yeah, Deere.
Okay, like John Deere, the tractor. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the next thing is I think that there are a lot of us out there that we have the head knowledge. We know the true and living God. We know his Son. We're a little iffy on the Holy Spirit and the working of the Holy Spirit. But I know that I'm not alone in feeling like I love him so much, but I don't think he loves me. And I listen to all these ministers on the radio, and it's like everyone's blessed with the Holy Spirit. I don't know how to get the heart and the mind to agree. I don't feel that he's close to me, and I'm sorry about his son. I've been going through that the last 3 years because my son did the same thing, but he did survive. But he's in a care facility because they had to cut his eyes out, and he lost his frontal lobe. And that's very hard, so I'm very sorry that he lost his son.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth, for your question and comment. I mean, it's just one of the things I think we find in Scripture is that we might not know the answers to the questions, but I think one of the beautiful things that what Job demonstrates is that we don't have to know the answers to the questions, but we just have to know that God's presence is in the midst of us, with us, draws near to the brokenhearted. And so we'll take our next phone call. We've got Julia in Texas right now. Julia, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Julia, what's your point of view?
I just wanted to thank you, Jack, for writing this book and for all your comments today. I was driving home from the library from picking up a book I had ordered, and I'm listening to this, and it's just touching my heart so much. And I know you're not supposed to text and drive, but I'm trying to get your name and the name of the book in my phone so I can get the library to order it from me. And I'm just totally being blessed by so many things that you said that just touched home for me. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And I can't wait to read your book and hear more and love God more and feel his love more and, not go off performance or anything like that. And I just wanted to thank you because it was such a blessing and so unexpected. I listen to Christian radio a lot. And every now and then, God just sends you the right stuff you need at that moment in time. And you did that for me today, and I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Your comments are a blessing to me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Julia, for calling in. And so just to make our listeners aware, his name is Jack Deere, J-A-C-K, Deere, D-E-E-R-E. Like John Deere Green. I'm sure that you, the country part of me just chuckles at that. But nevertheless, you can find his book, Even in Our Darkness, A Story of Beauty in a Broken Life, not only in the Point of View website, pointofview.net, or you can jump on over to Amazon.com and find his book there, Even in Our Darkness. But know that you can go to pointofview.net, and we have his book available, and we have a link available so that you can purchase this. Jack, thank you so much. Anything that you want to leave our listeners with?
Just pray to feel the affection of the Lord Jesus. Pray to be one of his best friends like John and Mary, and he'll answer those prayers if we're faithful and we just keep praying them. It's the key to life. It's the key to loving him, is feeling his love first.
That is so great. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for your time that you've given us. We are so grateful for that. And again, want to continue to recommend this book oh so highly to you, Even in Our Darkness, a story of beauty in a broken life. This was Jack Deere. And so that'll do it for this edition of Point of View. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Nick Pitts, and so we're so grateful. Hopefully Kirby is enjoying his vacation, and I will be back with you tomorrow on Point of View, where we'll have the Millennial Roundtable. We'll have Jonathan Bodnar with us, and we'll be talking more about Kanye West, but also about some of the other issues that are going to be percolating in the news. You'll want to circle back here on Facebook at facebook.com/pointofviewradio to find out this past episode, but also tomorrow's episode as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bye.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants his best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate